share my screen if that's okay. Can you hear me? So hi, folks. It's a pleasure to be here today, and a pleasure to be hearing from the other speakers. This is a great conversation. By way of introducing my contribution to the discussion, just to start out with saying, with the caveat that I choose throughout my presentation to use the reclaimed word queer to inclusively refer to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, asexual, two-spirit, and other LGBTQIA+ community members. So I wanted to start off very quickly just with a story of queerness and psychedelics that is kind of my own. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a white, queer, fat, able-bodied abuse survivor and colonizer living on the unceded lands of the Algonquin, Mohawk, and Anishinaabe people. I benefit from enormous privilege and am on a perpetual journey to better understand and dismantle the systems of oppression that I participate in and benefit from. I'm a psychedelic user, practitioner, researcher, and community organizer. And before coming back to school to do my PhD, I worked as a social justice lawyer for almost 20 years. And I lived overseas for much of that time, where both my queerness and my psychedelic practice were mostly hidden, mostly because many of the countries where I lived and worked criminalized one or both of those parts of me. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my story in the hopes of shedding some light on why I care about the intersection of psychedelics, ethics, community, queerness, and healing. My story is one of queerness and psychedelics in that way. And like everyone here, that story is also, our stories are a big part of why we choose to work in and care about the psychedelic space. Research, too, is an important form of storytelling. And when we don't pay attention to whose stories are getting told, how we're telling the stories, and who the storytellers are, we risk failing to reflect on and serve the full human experience in all of its diverse, beautiful, and varied glory, as speakers have already talked about today. And to be clear, as others have mentioned, when we say research, I don't just mean clinical trials and studies undertaken in an academic context. As we all know, psychedelic studies have a long tradition of both formal and informal investigation, analysis, and experimentation, and should be encouraged within the community more broadly. And so in whatever form it takes, storytelling reflects our world, but it also creates it. So when we tell stories by doing research, we are deciding what is important to ask questions about. We shine a light on specific subjects, people, and issues that we deem worthy of inquiry. And these topics get explored, discussed, witnessed, understood, and reflected upon together. Those of us who care about the way the psychedelic field is unfolding need to ensure that the research being done truly reflects the complexity and richness of being human, which is why we're here today. So that's why this conversation is so important to the evolving psychedelic space in Canada. So just wanted to thank the organizers for bringing us all together. And so, what is the story of the interaction of queerness and psychedelics? In general, in Western society, there have been strides. And at least queerness is no longer a diagnosable pathology in the DSM. But we still have a long ways to go. The queer community has a long history of persecution, stigmatization, and abuse in society at large, as well as within the psychedelic research space. An overt example of this abuse is the use of psychedelics to attempt conversion therapy on queer people. The motivations and impacts of some of these abuses are documented and often horrific. But abusive actions are not always so overt. For instance, omitting an entire set of lived experiences from the field of study is also a form of discrimination and abuse. And for queer folks, it's one that continues to be replicated. And so why is the queer story an important one for the psychedelic community? First, I argue that there's an urgency to understanding and addressing queer pain and marginalization. The journey of self-discovery should be a joyful revelation. But despite growing numbers of people coming out in Western culture, being queer is still often met with violent opposition in most parts of the world, with dire consequences. Even in North America, most suicide attempts of queer individuals occur within the first 5 years of realizing one's sexual identity, irrespective of age. And in North America, we see queer teens attempt suicide at a rate more than twice that of their straight peers. We have just to look at our neighbors to the south and the clawback on trans rights to see how vehement the opposition can get and how quickly hard-fought equity gains can be reversed. And so, systemic discrimination has dire consequences for all marginalized groups, including queer folks. And at the same time, marginalized folks are often the ones who are most in need of healing, community, and support. However, as we know, these are also the groups that are being omitted from the psychedelic research space. Like other marginalized groups, such as women, racialized folks, and queer folks, the queer experience is often a painful one. And our work in the therapeutic psychedelic space needs to better understand the pain suffered by those outside of the majority. However, to date, queer folks have largely been left out of the psychedelic revival, as I will talk about more in a minute. Second, exploring one's identity and understanding of self is fundamental to the queer experience and to the psychedelic one. One of the greatest strengths of the queer culture and community is the variety of ways that people can identify and express their authentic selves. This grappling with openness to a wide range of self-understanding outside of the or of the binary also highlights the andness of the queer experience. Being queer is inherently a creative act. For ultimately, being queer is not just about pronouns or who a person has sex with. Being queer involves intentionally grappling with questions of how we love each other and love ourselves. As queer folks, we can't rely on what society has told us about love and identity. So we have to actively ask questions of ourselves, such as, who am I? Who, how, and why do I love myself and others? There are few questions more fundamental to the human experience than these, for queer folks and for anybody. Thirdly, while much research is being conducted on the therapeutic use of psychedelics in medicalized settings, there's a small growing consideration around the importance of community and peer supports in psychedelic experiencing, a priority that queer folks, amongst others, have known about for a long time. Communal experiences such as found family and safe spaces such as queer clubs, bars, and rave scenes that outwardly signal a permissiveness for queer joy and expression have long been shown to facilitate healing from queer stress and trauma, whether participants are in a chemically altered state or not. So while there is a need to better understand the therapeutic use of psychedelics to combat queer trauma, there is wisdom within the queer community and experience to help inform a more comprehensive understanding of the potential of a range of therapeutic sets and settings, which can benefit a wide variety of marginalized groups and lived experience. However, despite these and many other meaningful overlaps between queerness and psychedelics, there's very little research being conducted on the queer psychedelic experience. And even amongst the very small amount that has happened, there is a distinct lack of representation. Myself and colleagues reviewed over 20,000 academic publications across the sciences and humanities and found that non-stigmatizing research on the intersection of psychedelic use and queer lived experience is virtually non-existent. We found a total of 19 resources. And troublingly, the academic research we did find focuses almost exclusively on the cis gay male experience. Studies and research on queer, cis, and trans women's psychedelic experiences are virtually non-existent, and trans, bisexual, non-binary, and gender diverse identities are equally forgotten. This lack of queer identity diversity is replicated in the underdeveloped examination of the role that race, ability, and other intersectional factors play in understanding a wide variety of queer psychedelic experience. We have to do better. And so, what's needed in Canada to move the psychedelic space? First, we need more stories being told, more research around the queer experience. I'll give a nod here to researchers such as Alex Belser, Clancy Kavnar, Terrence Ching, and also to all of the non-academic resources and experts contributing to the psychedelic space. There are efforts being made to capture data on sexuality and gender in the clinical trials, but that data is often not disaggregated to make any meaningful commentary on the queer experience. And very little research has been done specifically to explore the unique ways in which queer individuals use, experience, and may benefit from psychedelics. We need more queer researchers, more research looking directly at the queer experience, and more research informed by the queer experience, such as identity formation and the importance of community. Secondly, we need to do some work to rewrite some of the existing stories, since, as I mentioned, there's a lot of stigmatizing research out there, and we need to dismantle the stigmatizing narrative around the confluence or connection between drug use and the queer community. Thirdly, we need more diverse stories. New research must ensure that we're looking across the spectrum of sexual orientation, gender identity, but also ethnic and racial identities, ability, and economic privilege. Collectively, as a psychedelics community, we need to get better at seeking to understand the full range of lived experience. This includes quantitative and qualitative research by academics and community alike, exploring not just the therapeutic, but also the spiritual and recreational use of psychedelics for healing and transformation. Because as we all know, the lines between therapeutic, recreational, and spiritual are very muddied and thin in a beautiful way. So there's lots to share, but I wanted to give a taste of what I think is the enormous potential in building out our understanding of the interaction of queerness and psychedelics. To close, I wanted to leave a final thought. As we all know, our engagement with psychedelics is not merely a chemical interaction. It is a phenomenological one, a spiritual, transpersonal, and transformational one. As part of the complexity of engagement, experiences of love are often a big part of how psychedelics transform how we understand ourselves and the world around us. Whether it is cultivating a love of self, experiencing love in a relationship with others or with the natural world, or bathing in the cosmic love that is our inherent right as human beings. As a queer psychedelic researcher, practitioner, and community member, I believe we have a responsibility to bring more considerations of love into the discussion. And I believe that the queer experience is one of those perspectives that is well placed to contribute to our evolving understanding of this space. As Indigenous researcher John Burroughs has argued, love is a public good. And I would argue that queerness is also a public good in some intersecting ways. As we've discussed, in my experience, inherent in being queer is committing ourselves to understanding love, finding love and compassion for oneself, understanding love for and with others, experiencing love as acceptance, love as universal truth, love as an earthbound and embodied practice, love as a choice that we make every day, and love as both an act of creativity and an act of creation. As we continue to build our understanding of the therapeutic, spiritual, and recreational use of psychedelics for healing and transformation, along with other important and often marginalized voices represented on this panel, I believe the queer lens will be fundamental to further our understanding of psychedelics, healing, and the self. In short, the story of queerness and psychedelics is a story that is just beginning to be told, and there's still much more to be written. But in my opinion, it's definitely a story worth telling. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, we hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. Now, if you want to support and become part of the psychedelic movement, feel free to donate to MAPS Canada at the link in the description below. Thank you for helping our mission to support equitable access to legal and regulated psychedelic medicines for all Canadians.